What motivates people to give up their lives, their wealth, and even their identities to a charismatic leader? How do ordinary, everyday individuals become trapped in manipulative, often dangerous belief systems? And when the illusion of a perfect world begins to break, what then? Throughout history, cults have risen and fallen, leaving behind dark stories of control, deception, and tragedy. But some of the most disturbing cases remain largely unknown to the public. So we're going to dive deep into the rise and collapse of 3 such cults, each led by figures who promised enlightenment but delivered something far, far more sinister. Crime, conspiracy, cults, serial killers, and murder, all things that I love to consume. And I know you do too, you sick, twisted, lovely, beautiful, intellectually minded freak. So today we are talking about just that, cults. 3 of them. 3 of which I don't think you've heard of. And if you have, well, I don't know, don't listen. Yeah, you should listen anyway. But without further ado, let's unbuckle our seatbelts, go Mach 5 down the highway, slam on the brakes, and bust through this windshield into these 3 disturbing cults together. So the first cult we're going to be talking about today is Angel's Landing. Sounds nice, right? It's fucking not. It's not. It's the furthest thing from nice. It should be called the Devil's Landing. It's probably my worst joke. That'll the jokes will get up from here, go up from here for sure. And the first joke I will mention is the man named Daniel Perez, the cult leader, if you will. And he was born in Aransas Pass, Texas in 1959. And he was somewhat of an enigmatic figure with early info on his life largely undisclosed. It was difficult to find information on what he was like as a little kiddo, and unlike what he was like as a young adult. What job he had. Did he work at McDonald's? I don't fucking know. The guy is a bit of a mystery, but I don't really care because he's a giant piece of shit. But into his adulthood, he did work in Texas prisons, aviation and maintained airplanes, and the Navy. And in 1996 to 1997, he was also accused of sexual crimes against 2 young girls. Girls, yeah. It gets bad right out the gate with this guy. This guy is like mega boss. And these girls were only 11 and 14. But these specific cases would be dismissed. Why, you ask? Because he was reported dead. But he actually wasn't. In reality, he just changed his name to Lou Castro and moved out of state. You can't do that shit now. You can't do that shit. That's crazy. I wonder how many people did that. Just like wipe their slate completely clean. It's just sick. But this is when he would start to build somewhat of a following. Not necessarily a cult at this point, but a bit of a following. A commune, if you will. So he allegedly traveled with members of his commune for several years across multiple states before finally settling into their home of Angel's Landing. Devil's Landing. And the states they would move to was Texas, the Dakotas, Missouri, Kansas, and eventually Tennessee. But that was after Angel's Landing. So Perez, or Lou Castro at this time, claimed to be a seer with the ability to see the future. Like that's so Raven, and that seems pretty standard as a cult leader. They all claim that the doomsday is coming. They know the future because they're a prophet, blah 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 bullshit. But he would also claim that he would need young girls to sustain his life and wanted regular access to his followers. His followers being a lot of young girls. And by access, you can draw that conclusion. Just fucking sick. He's just a giant sicko. And there are some just heartbreaking quotes from some of the girls that endured this fucking asshole after the fact. Like after he got caught, they were quoted saying, while other 10-year-old girls were riding bikes or playing with dolls, I was laying naked in bed with a pillow over my head, just waiting for it to be over. And she would go on to say, while other 13-year-old girls were getting boyfriends and holding hands, I was holding on to my secret and losing the people I loved one by one. When other 16-year-olds were experiencing their freedom of learning how to drive and planning parties with their friends, I was planning my own death every day when I drove to school. Just heartbreaking stuff. Like, this guy is just a waste of oxygen. And on top of being able to see the future, or claiming to be able to see the future and taking advantage of young girls, he also claimed to be 1,000-year-old angel himself. What Lou used to tell us that he was 1,000 years old and that he was an angel himself. Lou Castro had all of his followers believing that he was centuries old and that his body was inhabited by angels. Listen, I know everybody that not everybody but a lot of people that join cults are usually very lost. They have nowhere to go. They're there, they don't have a sense of self, a sense of worth. But if a fucking little prick came up to me saying he could see the future, takes advantage of young girls, and says he's a 1,000-year-old angel, I would punch him in the throat. So for future reference, do that. Do that if some guy comes up to you and says all this stuff. It's like crazy. Just another prophet. He is a prophet of some sort. He is the middleman from whoever's up there to whoever's on earth. And on top of all, that he said he could make it rainin', not money, which he could do money to, we'll get into that, but literally make it rain. He could heal people and he could use his future-seeing powers to tell you were going to die, but because of him, you would come back after death. So basically, he was like, oh yeah, you guys are gonna die on Tuesday at 3:00 by getting hit by a bus, but don't worry, 16 years after that, I'll bring you back. It's gonna be some crazy zombie apocalyptic shit. It's crazy. Don't worry, I'm a 1,000-year-old angel, okay? I can see the future, alright? But he basically made death feel like a very normal thing, regularly telling his followers that the goal in life was to be on the other side and the other side and the other side being the afterlife. Lulu talked about death frequently and how going to the other side was the ultimate goal. And this commune was made up of a small group of people with very diverse backgrounds, all vulnerable in some way that Perez or Lou Castro would take care of. He also made sure that all of the members of Angel's Landing had their needs met. The members of the Angel's Landing cult had been living really well, but there was always a price to pay for that stuff. He would actually make sure that everyone on the compound's needs were met, and not just met because they would live very extravagantly. And this is not like a lot of other cults. I mean, usually you find that the cult leader is the only one living extravagantly, but he made sure that everybody was kind of even keel, like everybody had stuff. But there's a reason for that, and it's really fucked up. So the compound itself was located at North Oliver, near the town of Ketchwai, Kansas. What a fun name. And they would have fairly large houses and a swimming pool, and all the members had pretty expensive vehicles, and Perez himself reportedly drove a lot of Corvettes. Very discreet cult leader. And Perez would make use of his different person as of angels inhabiting his body to control his followers. Those angels being Daniel, Arthur, and Amber. And he would open life insurance policies for commune members and set up other commune members as the beneficiaries of those policies. You see where the money's coming from. You'll see it gets bad. So he would basically direct how the policies were to be written. He had a very specific way of writing these policies. And then he would convince his followers that those who died would come back, as we know zombie apocalypse shit. Manipulating them to carry out his fraud basically, cause he's putting other people's names on the policies, like people that aren't related to these people, or himself his name on these policies, just to be able to get the money after these people die. But Chris, how would he get the money? He'd have to wait for people to die. He'd have to wait 50, 60, 70 years. No. When money got tight in the commune, one of his followers would just mysteriously die. When the rent had to be paid, he would just off somebody, which is so insane. And then obviously when that person died, a very large life insurance check would benefit the commune, amounting to millions of dollars. So on top of his insurance deaths, he was obviously exploiting these young girls as well at Wero. He's just bad at every angle. Just the scum of the earth at every angle. And he would tell the girls in order to keep them quiet by him doing what he was doing, it would fix them, because he is who he is. He's a 1,000-year-old angel. He has all these powers. So he said all this stuff to basically just keep them quiet. So in 2001, Mona Griffith, a member of the commune, would die in a plane crash in South Dakota with her boyfriend and 12-year-old daughter. This one wasn't actually procured by Perez. Obviously didn't make a plane crash. It was just a really fucked up coincidence. So Perez, or Lou Castro, it was the one listed as a brother at the obituary and on the life insurance policy, which was $700,000. And he would get that $700,000 over her other child, who she had one child that died in the plane crash, but she had another child that didn't die in the plane crash. So he would just take all of that money and not give any to the kid. And then on June 2003, Patricia Hughes, a member of the commune, as well would die from what was believed to be an accidental drowning in the commune pool. So a funeral would take place in South Texas, and it's been reported that Perez told commune members that attended the funeral not to tell anyone in Texas that he was in Kansas because he doesn't exist. Remember, he's dead on paper anyway. And then in March 2006, Brian Hughes, Patricia's husband and also a member of the commune, would die in South Dakota while working underneath a vehicle. Brian is a diesel mechanic. I remember Lou telling Brian, "You will someday get your chance to go to the other side." Brian was so safety conscious that day somehow that Jack slipped. Very suspicious. And then in 2008, Jennifer Hudson, not that Jennifer Hudson, different Jennifer Hudson, a real estate agent and a member of the commune, would die when her vehicle crossed into oncoming traffic and would hit a truck head-on. Again, very suspicious. And Sarah McGarth, her daughter and also former member of the commune, would open up about her mom's death in 2008. And she would recount that her mom went to work that day, and she tried calling her, but her mom never answered. Lou comes downstairs and he says Jennifer's been in an accident. Said she's dead, didn't she? But Perez wouldn't really give her a straight answer, and that made the daughter really mad. He wouldn't answer me, and that really pissed me off. So I go running behind him and I say, "What did you do to my mom? I mean, the people in the commune, they're not stupid. They know that these events that are happening might be caused by Perez because they're gonna come back later. It doesn't matter if they die and we collect money because they're gonna come back, remember." I remember. But this started to lose its luster after so many people were eyeing because Trish and Brian had died. There were other people in the commune and they hadn't come back yet. So the daughter obviously believed that her mother wasn't gonna come back released anytime soon, either. So investigators would start to catch on to the scheme. A lot of life insurance policies were being paid out to like one specific person or these specific people in this commune. And people were eyeing left and right. And who was this guy? Who was Lou Castro? They didn't know. So Sedgwick County Sheriff's Detective Ron Goodwin, along with other investigators, compiled 500,000 pages worth of documentation of what Perez was up to, which spanned over 20 years in multiple states, as we know. And Goodwin devoted 9 years to figure out who Perez was and where the hell he got all his money, because Perez was living like a fucking king. And he had no job this entire time, but he's driving around a bunch of Corvettes. He has houses. He has a pool. He has all these things. So it just didn't add up. So he became suspicious of Perez, at this point still known as Lou Castro, in April 2003 when he noticed Perez's group had multiple $40,000 to $50,000 vehicles. Very suspicious. And their compound had the 2 houses and a very nice swimming pool as well. So all this unexplained wealth was starting to look pretty nefarious. A lot of nefarious activities looked like they were happening. So Goodwin was on the case. So, if you remember, June 2003, a member of the group, Patricia Hughes, would die in the commune swimming pool accidentally. For those of you listening, I'm making very obvious, quotes winking accidentally. And this was one of the cases that drew the attention of Goodwin to look further and discover that Castro may not be who he says he is. And Castro had no apparent records and was not easily identifiable. And he had basically no identifiable past either, cause the guy didn't fucking exist. So he would do a little song and dance and claim that he came from oil wealth and he was an inventor or that he was a cattle seller. Just spewing bullshit to investigators, and none of which could be verified. So it didn't hold up very long. But all of the members in the commune were identifiable through databases, but Lou Castro was not. So that was looking suspicious even more dog this time. But Goodwin did find that Castro had a South Dakota id card, and this would lead to the discovery of Mona Griffith's death in 2001 on top of her boyfriend's. And her daughters where Castro was listed as the brother of Griffith. So he was just raking in the dough after all 3 of these people died. So in 2000, Goodwin would enlist the help of FBI agent John Sullivan to help identify Castro. And they had worked together before on other drug cases. And Sullivan was unable to find a photo or description matching Lou Castro. So not even the FBI could find out who this guy was. And Goodwin would do everything he could to get fingerprints. He would follow Castro around and gather trash from the compound. He even got permission from a manager to collect glasses and silverware. This is some movie shit. But no fingerprint to identify Castro was ever found. So the case would slowly become cold. So Goodwin would drive to Angel's Landing over the next couple years every once in a while because he would just wake up every night just wondering who the hell Castro really was and what the hell was he up to. And in 2006, Goodwin would learn about another death end. This one was Brian Hughes, Patricia Hughes' husband, who was crushed under that car in South Dakota. And he heard about it due to a custody case involving the Hughes daughter. And at this point, there were 5 deaths from 3 fatal accidents in just 5 years, all associated with same commune. So in late 2006 and early 2007, Goodwin requested for the U.S. Attorney's Office to open a case to review the commune's finances. Now we're getting somewhere. At around the same time, Goodwin was assigned to a task force to go after the Crips Street gang located in Wichita. Wichita Crips, Wichita Crips, Wichita. Those are 2 fun words to say. And it's here that he began working with Clint Snyder. Cool-ass Naaman would tell him all about Castro. And Snyder became very interested, but they were too busy with the Crips at this point. And then in 2008, as we know, Jennifer Hudson knew not that one would die in an apparent traffic accident, bringing the total commune deaths to 6. In a response, strategies to trick Castro to giving prints were thrown around. Goodwin went with another detective to Angel's Landing under the guise of looking into the area for home break-ins. So they gave Castro glossy images of suspects, quote-unquote suspects, asking if he knew any of them. And Castro would only touch the images with the palms of his hands. Bastard. And would move them on a table using his fingernails. The guy, he was a shifty fucker. And Castro would give his name but claim that he didn't have an it around, so he couldn't give one to them. And he also provided a false social security number on top of that. So in late 2009, the Crips case cools off a bit now, and Goodwin and Snyder are assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office with the focus on the financial investigation. And Goodwin would receive a call from Sullivan, the FBI agent from before, asking if there's a fax machine nearby because he wanted to send over an email from the boyfriend of a young woman who had been part of the commune. And he was very suspicious of Castro. And at this point, Castro had moved to Columbia, Tennessee in early 2010. So after the FBI received this email, the agent started to watch Castro's house. And he was currently living with 5 people at that point. Castro at this point had also changed his name again to Joe Vanegas upon moving to Tennessee. And he would be caught on camera or showing his new ID to open a bank account. And that is when he would be charged with aggravated identity theft and fraudulent use of a social security number. We got him. We got him. And on April 21st, 2010, Goodwin, Snyder, and Sullivan would go to Tennessee with a search warrant of Castro's home. So he was arrested and got fingerprinted finally, but no match would be found in the federal database. And other investigators were interviewing witnesses through all of this time, but the members of the community weren't really giving up much info. They were all pretty loyal to Castro at this point. So Goodwin and Snyder just talked to basically anyone who would talk to them about this commune and everything that was going on. And they would interview about 85 people. And Castro during this whole thing would just stay completely silent, giving them the complete silent treatment. But he would plead guilty to one of the 2 charges brought against him in the federal case. And he would just go to federal prison as John Doe cause. They still didn't know who this guy was. So during his sentence, Goodwin and Snyder worked to build the best case they had against him. And they discovered from Patricia Hughes' mother in Beeville, Texas, that Patricia had dated a man named Daniel Perez but had since heard that he was dead. So they followed that thread to find an old booking mug and fingerprints that matched Castro's. And boom, they found them. So they picked up copies of the police reports on Perez from Beeville, including that dismissed case from 1996 to 1997 mentioned in the beginning with the girls, who were 11 and 14. And the case, as we know, was dismissed because Perez was presumed dead. And as Perez was away in prison, his commune began to open up more and more and more. They began to be sick and tired of Perez's bullshit. And one young woman would recount an incident in which Perez made her break a computer hard drive of the hammer and toss it into the lagoon in Angel's Landing. And the hard drive would actually be recovered after Sedgwick County firefighters drained the entire body of water to find it. And eventually one of his followers became the big break. She revealed that Perez was described as someone capable of seeing the future and needed a young girl to live. And she would describe all of his sex crimes that he did throughout all of the years. And she would also reveal that Perez had forced her to give a false story about Patricia Hughes when authorities arrived. Patricia Hughes being the one that accidentally drowned in the community pool. And this girl was supposed to say that Hughes slipped and fell and drowned in the pool. But what she actually experienced was screams and splashes, leading to Perez seemingly out of breath and completely wet. He had drowned her. And with the testimony, they finally had enough for a murder case. Thank God. And on January 2, 2012, Sedgwick County prosecutors filed murder and dozens of other charges against Perez while he was still in prison. And on February 2015, teen Daniel Perez was convicted of 28 charges by the jury. 1 count of first-degree murder, 8 counts of rape, 7 counts of aggravated criminal sodomy, 3 counts of aggravated assault, 1 count of sexual exploitation of a child, 8 counts making false information. And he received to life sentences plus 406 months on lesser charges with no possibility for parole for at least 80 years. So the guy's gonna fucking die in a rotting jail hole? Thank the Lord. But my lord, like this guy, I don't know how many times I say, it just scum of the earth. Like, I am so glad he got caught and these officers were just on him for as long as they were. And I hope all of the victims involved are living much better lives. But just incredibly sad. Incredibly sad. But that brings us to our next cult, which is Love Has Won. So born on November 30th, 1975 in McPherson, Kansas, Amy Carlson was unfortunately the subject of HBO miniseries Love Has Won, the cult of Mother God. Carlson's early life appeared pretty conventional. She was raised in a middle-class family, excelled in school for the most part and even participated in the school choir. But her parents would divorce during her childhood, and this would lead her and her sister Tara to split their time between their mother's home in Kansas and their father's home in Oklahoma City. Then, following allegations of abuse by their stepmother, the sisters moved in permanently with their mother and stepfather. And the family would later relocate to Dallas, Texas when Carlson continued her education. And in the mid-2000s, Carlson became deeply involved in New Age philosophies and would frequently post on a forum called Lightworkers. Oh, sure. And I went on that site, it's gone now, so I guess we'll never know. But there she connected with a user named MRTH, White Eagle, the original Father God, who convinced her of her own divinity. Oh no, or should I say, oh God. And as an adult, she would work as a manager at McDonald's, as the Divine Mother of God does. And she would go on to have 3 children, each with different fathers. And in late 2007, Carlson left her 3rd husband, children, and job, severing ties with most of her family completely. Mother of the Year. And she would join White Eagle in Colorado, and together they founded a group initially known as Galactic Federation of Light. The Galactic Federation of Light. I mean, that's pretty cool name. It's a pretty cool name. I'll give them that. Some sort of Star Wars shit. But this later would evolve into Love Has Won. And Carlson would profess to be a 19 billion year old deity, having lived 500 third eye for previous lives. She's got a couple up on Perez at this point, the 1,000-year-old angel. She's like, I'll take your 1,000-year angel and raise you a 19 billion-year-old deity who's lived 500 third eye for different lives. What the fuck? And these lives, if you were wondering, included the life of Jesus Christ, Joan of Arc, and Marilyn Monroe. Just like all the coolest people ever, basically. I wish she did like Elvis Presley too, but that would mess up her timelines. That wouldn't be legit, And she asserted that she could heal ailments such as cancer with the powers of love. Powers of love? So similar to Perez saying he can heal all this shit. It's just the same with all of them. At least be original, like Jim Jones did the same shit. He said he could see into the future. He could cure cancer, yada yada yada. So I would like them to be original at some point. I'm just kidding. I don't want to see any more cult leaders. I'll tell you what. And under Carlson's leadership, Love Has Won combined elements of New Age spirituality, conspiracy theories, and mainstream religions. The group conducted daily live streams to recruit members, solicit donations, and promote spiritual healing services. I love spiritual live streams where you can donate bits to cult leaders. They're my favorite. But Love Has Won operated under a unique spiritual framework that combined various religions and mystical elements. Amy Carlson being the mother of God, she was basically seen as the only conduit for spiritual enlightenment and ascension. And the Father of God was basically just a Rolodex of male figures in her life throughout her leadership. Carlson took on multiple fathers of God male consorts who she claimed were incarnations of divine masculinity. And these individuals often became key enforcers of her control over her followers. So then there was the Galactic Federation and Ascension beliefs, which was that the cult believed that the world was in the process of a great transformation, and Carlson was the only entity capable of leading humanity into the fifth dimension. Fifth dimension, okay, alright, not quite as you know their worst pace with Applewhite or whatever the hell his name was in Scientology's got his own thing, but fifth dimension, I gotta say, it is original. It's more original. But the followers were required to relinquish their ego and fully submit to Carlson's teachings. And any deviation from her doctrine was seen as a resistance to spiritual growth. And Love Has Won integrated elements of various conspiracy theories, as I was saying, including ideas of extraterrestrials. 5, deconsciousness and global government corruption, which she got some points there, but most of it's ridiculous. And the cult used several methods to attract and retain members, cause you're like, how does a woman just walk up to you on the street and say, I'm a 19 billion year old deity that's lived 534 other lives, including of which is Jesus Christ, Joan of Arc, and Marilyn Monroe. Would you like to join my little cult? People are just like, oh right, I just don't see that happening. So how did they do it? They did it with social media and daily live streams. This is not looking good for social media right now. Love Has Won gained traction through frequent online broadcasts, and Carlson and her followers discussed their beliefs, solicited donations, and recruited new members that way. And recruits were often those experiencing hardships, which we find with pretty much every cult I've ever covered, and just every cult in history, just vulnerable people, including those that have financial instability or health crises as well. And the cult just offered them a sense of community and purpose, and many members were drawn to Carlson's promises of spiritual enlightenment and physical healing from diseases such as cancer through etheric surgeries. These are also sometimes called psychic surgeries, in other words, surgery that uses psychic or spiritual means to avoid physical contact. So there's those people that move their hands over people's bodies, and then the people under it are moving unshittened. It's just all like a placebo kind of effect. That's kind of what they're talking about. I grew up watching thousands of people at revival conferences claim to be healed of everything from arthritis to cancer. But again, living in this cult required complete devotion to the Mother of God and a very strict adherence to her rules. And living in this cult it's not that glamorous. Members would live in very cramped quarters, and they often did not have adequate food or heating. And they shared a communal space in Colorado where they expected to serve Carlson without any question. So in their daily life, the followers would participate in online broadcasts to spread the group's message and solicit donations. And this would be their main source of income. And the members would have to refer to Carlson as Mom and constantly praise her. Bitch had to praise King, let's just be real. Believing that she was working to save humanity. And those who deviated and displayed ego or disobeyed orders were humiliated on live streams or subjected to verbal and physical abuse. My vision was chicken parmesan, so the fucking atoms turn around on me and get me meatballs. I didn't say meatballs. And to maintain power over her followers, Carlson implemented a series of manipulative and extreme control tactics. She would force fasting, having members often deprived of any food as a means of spiritual cleansing and control, basically. And Carlson herself reportedly went without eating for extended periods of time, encouraging others to do the same. Which, I don't believe her. She's sneaking Pop-Tarts late at night. I know it. And she would also sleep deprive them, similar to Jim Jones, the original Carlson. but the followers were kept in a state of exhaustion, limiting their ability to think critically or question the group's practices, because sleep deprivation, it's real. It's a torture tactic. Like if you're sleep deprived, you're a zombie. That point, you are a brainwashed zombie or have the potential to be. And then just full on isolation from the outside world again. Just be original, just same shit. Any communication with outsiders was completely discouraged, reinforcing dependency on the cult. Everything's about separating and then brainwashing and just having full control. And then of course we had threats of punishment. One man was reportedly found after group members discussed how his energy wasn't right during the live stream and that he was on the wrong side of the mountain. So they would basically stick him out in the wilderness alone, naked and dehydrated, with cactus needles in his feet, and be forced to look up into the sun until his eyes were burnt. Oh my God, what? And naturally, as many cults do, members were required to surrender their financial assets to the group cause. Its communal cause. Everybody is equal. Theory. Everybody can put their money in on, just never see it again. And don't worry, I'm not buying pop darts with them. So there was the financial manipulation, isolation from families, abusive practices, claims of divine healing, miraculous transformations, literal torture tactics. It is just a hell on earth for these people, but they felt like this is where they needed to be. I love me bubbles, but I didn't fucking say that. I get fucked up every fucking moment by you fucking motherfucking whores and shove it up your fucking ass. We'll take another Tarkula shot. I'll fucking do that shit. And on top of all this, Carlson would claim that this wasn't a cult. This isn't a cult. This is just its fun. We're just having a good time. I was Jesus Christ in a past life. Don't question me. It would even be featured on Dr. Phil. They're very peaceful here at the moment. Things are often not peaceful around you, cause I've seen some of your streams. I've seen some of the videos where you seem to be upset a lot, yelling and screaming and calling names and alling names. What is it what upsets you the most? Well, a lot of those are taken out of context. But time would go on and Carlson's health would decline and her belief system impacted her physical condition. She obviously adhered to very unconventional health practices, including the ingestion of colloidal silver, which the group promoted as a cure-all remedy. It was even purchasable on their website, which is obviously no longer available. And in the months leading up to her death, Carlson appeared very weak with thinning hair and discolored skin, indicative of severe health decline. And prolonged consumption of colloidal silver can lead to argyria. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, a condition causing blue-gray discoloration of skin and may result in seizures and organ failure. Maybe don't eat silver, just a thought. I actually don't care, you're kind of a piece of shit. The combination of heavy booze, lack of eating, intense fasting, and the colloidal silver wreaking havoc on her body. It was just a recipe for death. And that is what would happen. She would die. And in April of 2021, Carlson's mummified body was discovered in the group's Colorado headquarters. And just a little trigger warning, this is very strange. Her body was found in a sleeping bag wrapped in Christmas lights, with her face covered in glitter and her eyes missing, suggesting a makeshift shrine. I have no words. For that. And the 7 members of Love Has Won were obviously arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse and also child abuse. 2 children were present in the home where Carlson's body was found, which is horrifying to think about. And there were initial plans to upgrade the charges to tampering with a deceased human body, but all the charges would later be dropped. So what remains of Love Has Won? Well, following her death, the group faced increased scrutiny, obviously leading to its eventual soft ending, though splinter groups remain. And co-leader Jason Castillo, which was one of the Fathers of God, formed a new group called Joy It Reigns. And other former members would rebrand their online presence to FD Full Disclosure, launching a new website to continue spreading their beliefs. And this website is crazy. I kind of want to sign up. Should that be a video? Should I sign up, tell you guys what happens? I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. That's crazy. The brainwashing that happened in this and the aftermath, just brutal. But that brings us to our final cult, which is Rajneesh Param. So Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh was born on December 11th, 1931 as Chandra Mohan Jain in Kushwada. I'm sorry if I'm saying these wrong. I'm trying my best. It was a small village in central India's Madhya Pradesh state, and was the full-on subject of a Netflix documentary, which I'm sure you've seen if you like watching me, which was Wild Wild Country. He was the eldest of 11 children in the Jain family, and a Jain family is one that practices the teachings of Jainism, which was an ancient Indian religion, focused on non-violence and separation from attachment to worldly possessions. And he would spend most of his childhood with his maternal grandparents, and they allowed him considerable freedom, fostering his independent and inquisitive nature. And his father Babul al-Jain was a cloth merchant, and he demonstrated a highly developed intellect and a rebellious spirit from a very young age. This is Bhagwan. I'm talking about the cult leader, the kid that's growing up. Sorry. It's not the father I'm talking about, it's the kid. And he would regularly question established norms and beliefs. And in 1951, he began his studies in Hitcare and I College in Jabalpur, but he would be later asked to leave due with conflicts with his instructor. And he then transferred to D.M. Jain College, where he would complete his Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy in 1955. And at the ripe old age of 21, he would experience what he called a spiritual awakening, and this had a major impact on his later teachings. And in 1957, he would earn his Master of Arts in Philosophy from the University of Sagar, graduating with distinction. And after completing his postgraduate studies, he secured a teaching position at Raipur Sanskrit College. However, his unconventional ideas led his vice-chancellor to request his transfer, deeming him a threat to the students morally and religiously. And he would later become a lecturer in philosophy at Jaipur University in 1958 and was promoted to professor in 1960. So I guess they were chill with whatever the hell he was trying to do. And during his academic tenure, he traveled extensively across India, engaging in public speaking opportunities. And he was a very outspoken critic of socialism, Mahatma Gandhi's philosophies, and institutionalized religions, advocating for a more individual approach to spirituality. And in 1970, he introduced the practice of meditation and initiated his first group of disciples known as Neo-Sannyas in Zokai. And dynamic meditation was characterized by fast breathing, uncelebration with music and dance. So just me having a panic attack basically, with like tunes bumping, just time. And this movement encouraged followers to embrace this celebratory lifestyle, pursuing physical pleasures. I don't know. And in 1974, he established an ashram in Pune, India, which became a hub for spiritual seekers from around the world. And an ashram is a place dedicated to spiritual practice, often found in very remote areas. And the ashram offered various therapies and workshops, blending Eastern spirituality with Western psychotherapy techniques. And he was known in the West as the Us ex-guru, all right. And he would attract many Westerners through promises of enlightenment, freedom, and belonging again, the original. So he would denounce traditional religion and promote self-actualization by means of meditation. Free love and communal living cause if everyone's on the same grade much easier to control. But by the late 1970s, Rajneesh's teachings, undrapid following, attracted significant attention. This guy's got a lot of names. I'm just gonna call him Rajneesh from here on out. And this created tension with Indian authorities on traditional religious groups. His progressive views on sexuality and criticism of established religions made him a very controversial figure. So seeking a location to expand his commune with no interference, Rajneesh and his secretary Mayan and Sheely identified the United States of America as a suitable destination. Land of the frees. Little to free in this scenario. And the vast lands and promise of religious freedom presented an opportunity to establish a new community aligned with their vision. And facing increasing pressure from Indian authorities due to the controversial teachings, he relocated to the United States in 1981. And the Rajneesh Foundation International purchased 64,229 acres in Big Muddy Ranch near Antelope, Oregon, with the intent to build a large self-sustaining commune. And the commune would become known as Rajneeshpuram and was the center of various legal and social controversies, but more on that later. The commune transformed the ranch into a thriving city basically constructed of essential infrastructure, including residential buildings, a public transport system, a sewage treatment plant, a reservoir, and even an airstrip. I mean, in coal communes, this one's up there. I mean by nice, I mean terrible, but I mean you know what I mean. But the goal was to create a self-sufficient community capable of supporting thousands of residents. And they would be incorporated as a city in May of 1980 to home solely to followers of Rajneesh. Now Sheila served as Rajneesh's personal secretary from 1981 to 1985, and she managed commune operations and acted as the primary spokesperson of the movement. Her very assertive and often confrontational demeanor made her a prominent and polarizing figure in the community. Sheila was basically an instrument in the commune's development. She oversaw all the land acquisition, infrastructure projects, and legal strategies. And her leadership style was marked by decisiveness as she maintained strict control over the commune's affairs. And the small town of Antelope with a population fewer than 60 residents became a focal point of conflict. A rapid influx of Rajneesh's followers led to cultural clashes and fears among locals about the commune's intentions. And an activist group known as the Thousand Friends of Oregon actively worked to prevent the growth and legitimacy of the commune. And the establishment of Rajneeshpuram led to numerous legal battles over land use time. We got a Yellowstone situation happening here, an incorporation legitimacy and alleged violations of state and federal laws. And these disputes would attract national attention. And residents of Rajneeshpuram viewed the surrounding Oregon communities as so. In 1984, members of the commune, under the direction of Sheila, cultivated salmonella bacteria in their medical laboratory. And they then contaminated salad bars at 10 local restaurants in the Dales by spreading bacteria over food items, which is so wrong and disgusting. And the deliberate contamination led to 751 reported cases of salmonellosis, marking the largest bioterrorist attack on a soil, which is crazy. And they aimed to influence local elections in favor of Rajneesh's by suppressing voter turnout in Wasco County through incapacitation by food poisoning, which is so fucked up. But it ultimately had the opposite effect as local residents were enraged by the suspected Rajneesh involvement. They showed up in even greater numbers as they should do. And to gain political control over Wasco County Rajneeshpuram, leaders initiated the Share a Home program. They would bring in thousands of homeless individuals from across the United States. And the intention was to register these individuals as voters in the county there by swaying election results in favor of Rajneesh-backed candidates. Which is like the amount of planning is wild, wild country, I get it now. But local officials would recognize these tactics as an attempt of voter manipulation. And the Wasco County Clerk enforced regulations requiring new voters to provide proof of residency and qualifications. So this effectively prevented the newly arrived homeless individuals from participating in the elections. And a federal judge upheld the measures which ruined the Rajneesh's plan to influence local governance through fraudulent means. So the Rajneeshpuram community engaged in widespread immigration fraud to facilitate the illegal entry and residency of foreign disciples. And this included setting up marriages between us citizens and for nationals to circumvent immigration laws. In 1985, federal authorities indicted several commune members for their involvement in the fraudulent activities marking one of the largest recorded marriage fraud schemes in the United States. So not only were they one of the largest bioterrorist attack groups, they were also the largest marriage fraud scheme in the United States. They're just hitting all the world records or United States records, at least you know. Gotta commend them on that. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But in September 1985, Sheila abruptly left the commune with several close associates, and the sudden departure was unexpected and raised suspicions among the remaining members. And following her exit, Rajneesh publicly accused her and her team of numerous criminal activities, including the attempted murder of his personal physician, the poisonings of public officials in Oregon, wiretapping and bugging within the commune and Rajneesh's own residence and of officials outside the commune, and the bioterror attack in the Dales. Which so he's just putting it all. He's like, she's gone, okay, she did it all, it was her idea, she's not here to answer for it, so it's her idea. Crazy bitch. So the FBI and the other federal agencies then launched extensive investigations into the activities of Rajneeshpuram, and they would confirm the criminal acts previously alleged by Rajneesh, including the bioterror attack, assassination plots, embezzlement, and illegal surveillance operations. And these actions were just part of a broader strategy to maintain control over the commune and suppress dissent. And key figures in the commune, including Sheila, were convicted on charges of immigration fraud, wiretapping, and conspiracy to tamper with consumer products. And Sheila's conviction for her role in the Salmonella by a terror attack led to her imprisonment and eventual collapse of Rajneeshpuram. Though Rajneesh was very quick to point the finger, it would not prevent him from his own arrest. On October 28, 1985, Rajneesh was arrested aboard a rented jet in North Carolina. Supposedly, he and his group were headed to Bermuda to avoid prosecution, and he would face third-eye for count indictment, primarily focusing on immigration violations, including the arrangement of the sham marriages mentioned earlier. And to avoid extended legal battles, Rajneesh entered an Alford plea acknowledging that sufficient evidence existed for a conviction without admitting guilt. So the plea deal resulted in a 10-year suspended sentence, 5 years of probation, a $400,000 fine covering penalties and prosecution costs, and an agreement to leave the United States of America and not return for at least 5 years without explicit permission from the U.S. Attorney General. So following the plea agreement, Rajneesh would leave the United States, and he then faced entry refusal from 21 countries before eventually returning to India, where he resumed his spiritual teachings at the Pun Ashram. And after the collapse of Rajneesh, many followers just dispersed globally. Some distanced themselves from the movement, while others continued to practice and promote Rajneesh's teachings independently. And Rajneesh rebranded himself to Osho upon his return to India. He's Daniel Perez, and he would continue to attract followers until his death on January 19th of 1990. And the movement adapted accordingly, with the main ashram in Pun transforming into the Osho International Meditation Resort, attracting visitors worldwide. And Osho's teachings have influenced various New Age practices and continue to attract a global audience. And the movement emphasizes specifically meditation, mindfulness, and personal transformation. However, despite its ongoing appeal, the movement has faced allegations of abuses. Former members have come forward with accounts of misconduct within the communes during the 1970s and the 1980s, to renewed scrutiny and discussions about the movement's legacy altogether. And this was all including the account of sexual abuse from a woman whose mother brought her into Rajneesh's community at the age of 9. And she describes life as a very young girl navigating a freel of community and dealing with the advances of much older men. She would quote to say, "At the time I suffered silently as he repeatedly drew me in with affection and took me to bed only to ignore me for days, as I watched him pursue adult women, and in time my peers. At the same time, other men circled, and eventually I gave in, as sleeping around and being liberated was the norm that was modeled to me. As time passed, I felt increasingly worthless and downtrodden, and took my bad feelings to mean I was flawed. We were to be positive, not negative, so I didn't speak of my pain and confusion. When the commune collapsed in 1985, we were all flung back into the world unprepared. I was 16, disoriented, broken, unsure of who I was to say. The trauma of my upbringing haunted me, but I couldn't yet name it. As the years passed, I came to see it for what it was, and came to see how Osho's teachings tilled the soil for abuse under the guise of spiritual freedom. To boot it second me, I distanced myself from the movement, from the teachings, and forgot a life of my own. So, like everything that we talked about, was just riddled with this time. All the fraud and biotremorists, it was all you know a means to have this group of people that Rajneesh could just control and do whatever he wanted with, which we see with all of these cult leaders that we're talking about, and a lot of other ones that I've talked about. And it's horrible and so heartbreaking, especially with kids. I mean, they don't know better. They don't know how to protect themselves, how to go about life. If an adult is telling them to do something, you're gonna do it. So it's just horrible. And I'm glad he's dead. But that is it for the 3 cults that we discussed today. I know it was a lot, but a lot of you guys asked for a cult video, so I gave it to you. But if you have any other video ideas, let me know down in the comments below. And I hope you stay very, very safe, and I will see your beautiful face in the next video, okay? Bye. Revenge is a fool's game. And for those of you who don't understand that Red Dead Redemption reference, here's a clip. Revenge is a fool's game. But this isn't a video game we're talking about today. And this isn't a cowboy hat. It's a pirate hat that I'm wearing. I didn't know where my cowboy hat was anyway. We're talking about real life revenge. And revenge is the pinnacle of human emotion. Someone did me wrong, so I must get them back. And I'm not personally one to demand revenge. But in this case of these 3 stories I'm going to tell you about today, it almost makes sense why the only option was revenge. So without further ado, let's unbuckle our seatbelts, go Mach 5 down the highway, slam on the brakes, and let's bust through this windshield into these 3 revenge stories together. Can you make that a whip noise? Before I get into the first story, I just want to say I pronounce things wrong. I pronounce things wrong a lot. You guys love to point it out in the comments even though I Google how to pronounce things a lot. Apparently Google steers me wrong, let's say. So I'm gonna do my best, but also feel free to read me out in the comments for pronouncing things wrong. I appreciate it, but I also apologize for pronouncing things anyway. Let's get to it. So the first case we're going to be talking about is the case of Gary Plushy, however you want to say it. I'm gonna say Plushy cause that's how Google told me to. But anyway, this man is celebrated in many communities for his revenge story, and it is still talked about to this day. His story inspires others with a sense of justice and terrifies others with his solution to this problem. But love him or hate him, this is his story. So Leon Gary Pluch was born November 10th, 1945 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He served his country in the United States Air Force and became a staff sergeant. And after retiring, he tried his luck at being a heavy equipment salesman back in his hometown, and he lived like everyone else. He attended an Astor Moss Senior School and was even in a frat called Kappa Alpha at Louisiana State University. And in his free time, he liked to fish, he liked to cook and cheer for his favorite teams, the college team LSU Tigers and the professional New Orleans Saints. And he had 4 children, 1 daughter and 3 sons. His daughter Sissy, Jennifer, Lori, and his 3 sons Jeffrey, Joseph, Jody, and Leon Gary Jr. And he was a devoted father with no prior criminal behavior or violent tendencies, and supposedly loved by all lay. However, one day he would change when he learned what was happening to one of his sons, Jody. And Jody was a normal kid, and as normal kids do, he played sports. Not that you're not normal if you don't play sports. Just one of the kids that played sports. And specifically during 1983 on 1980, for Jody was practicing karate lessons at 11 years old, and his karate instructor was 25-year-old Jeffrey Doucette. But he wasn't just teaching him karate. He was doing something far more sinister. For over a year, Jeffrey Doucette had been essaying Jody during these lessons. However, everything would soon come to light. And on February 14th, 1980, Doucette would kidnap Jody and take him very far away, all the way to Anaheim, California. And this trip was over 17 miles away from Jody's home. And supposedly he had told his mother, June, that he would be gone and back within 15 minutes and just wanted to show Jody some carpet he was laying. And this wasn't really suspicious at all due to the fact that Jeff Doucette's job was laying down carpet with his brother. And he was also a very trustworthy figure in Jody's life, which the Pluches recognized. But after not returning for a very long time and going on a full-blown trip, June realized something was very wrong, and she would tell her husband. It wasn't until February 29th, days after his disappearance, that a collection call was sent to their home, and they would track the origin of the message back to Anaheim, California, at a certain motel. And the Washington Post states that June waited for days before she told her husband that Jody was still not home. And it also states that Doucette actually called June, ordering her to bring the other children and their school transcripts. And she told Jeff that Gary would use this to get full custody of the children if he didn't bring them back. And there are a lot of strange differing evidence in the story here. Some saying Drew knew that he would be gone, while others say that she immediately called the FBI. But there's not enough sources to verify which is the true story, so I just have to go off what I know. But anyway, the FBI finally raided the motel and arrested Doucette on February 29th, 1984, and Jody was reunited with his family. And his father was overjoyed to see his son return home. So the whole family celebrated after he got home, because they were just anxiously waiting for their son to come home. I mean, he was across the country basically at that point, so it was great that Jody was finally home. But this wasn't the end of the story by any means. The man who had caused all this pain was still in custody back in California, and Jeff Doucette would later fly on March 16th, 1984 to face trial for his crimes. And Gary was obviously still not happy that his son's abuser was just walking around, justice still not being served several days after the incident. So the plane would land in Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport, where Jeff would be laid in handcuffs by officers around 9:30 p.m. However, someone was waiting at the airport for Jeff. Gary Pluch would get a tip from an ABC affiliate that Jeff had just landed and Gary would make his way to the airport very quickly. And a news crew had set up cameras for Jeff's arrival. Opposite to the cameras were payphones set up and Gary was waiting to strike. It all recorded on live television. Once Jeff Doucette walked past the payphones, Gary turned around with his revolver and shot Jeff perfectly in the head, all while donning a baseball cap, wearing sunglasses and shooting a moving target. And again, this was all recorded on live TV, with the shot obviously showing the trickling blood from Jeff Doucette's head. Just absolutely brutal. I've seen the whole video. If you're very sensitive to that kind of stuff, I wouldn't watch it personally, but it's like brutal. And this incident would obviously lead officers to tackle Gary to the ground. And the officers obviously knew exactly who had committed the incident, cause they knew Gary at this point because they had been dealing with his son being kidnapped. But since the officers knew who he was, one of the officers would actually call out why Gary why during this whole incident. The camera crew is still filming everything. They even zoom in where you can see blood pouring out of Doucette's head. It is just absolutely vile. But anyway, they would obviously put Gary into handcuffs as he had just committed a murder on live television, one of which was against a criminal about to be tried for his own son's essay in kidnapping. And unsurprising was his mental state during his son's disappearance. When he had found out that his son was stolen by his karate instructor, he obviously was angry and it took a psychological toll. Some reports stated he had a full mental breakdown. And who wouldn't, knowing that their son was kidnapped, especially by someone who had been abusing your child? Like, it's just a horrible, horrible circumstance. But anyway, Gary was obviously in trouble and was going to face legal consequences for his actions. So he would be charged for second-degree murder and pleaded no contest to manslaughter. However, his punishment wouldn't be as severe as you might think. The judge would rule that he would, instead of being put behind bars, be sentenced to 5 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. Definitely a step down from what you would expect for a cold-blooded planned murder. But the media portrayed him as what he was, a grieving father angered by the criminal who had abused his son, a broken man with anger he couldn't control and his mental state clearly unstable and unforgiving. And he became some sort of hero overnight, a vigilante who took matters into his own hands against someone who he found fucking disgusting. Which I'm not gonna say. Listen, okay, I don't give my opinion a lot, especially on something like this turret. But if hypothetically I had a child that hypothetically got kidnapped by someone who hypothetically did stuff to my kid, I wouldn't. I'm not saying I would do what he did, but if for any reason that person, somebody else, did it, I wouldn't be shedding tears over the death. I'm just saying that. Let's just say that. In interviews with his son later on showed that Jody did not actually want his father to kill him, cause he had this attachment to Doucette even though all he saw was happening. He was kind of another not necessarily father figure, but he was somebody he looked up to because this man had groomed him over a certain amount of time. And he would actually grow to be able to forgive his father, understanding why he did it and taking matters into his own hands. After he found out what had happened to his son, I understand exactly what my father did. He got lucky cause he didn't go to jail. But there are still varying viewpoints, obviously. He committed a crime and murdered someone, but on the other hand, he got cold and hard revenge for his son's abuser. Like, again, I'm not gonna say it's right cause it's not cause. Murder's wrong, but again, I'm not crying about it. But I would love to know what you think down in the comments below about this one, because it's a lot of this, Tart. It's a lot of this. I don't think people should do stuff to kids like that. I think it's very wrong and I think they deserve to burn in the fiery depths of hell. But I also don't agree with murder in any way, shape, or form, so it's hard to say. But he is still seen as a hero to many, and I can't tell you the amount of t-shirts and media I have seen praising Gary Plushie, who is a visual anti-hero to a lot of people. But unfortunately, Gary would die of a stroke at 68 years old on October 21st, 2014. That is the story of Gary and Jody Plush. And now we move on to Lisa McVeigh. So in 1980, for a 17-year-old girl named Lisa McVeigh suffered unimaginable horrors at the hands of a serial killer, Bobby Joe Long. But this isn't just a story of survival. It is a sweet tale of revenge. From leaving crucial DNA evidence to memorizing every detail of her captor, Lisa outsmarted Long at every turn. Very similar to the Kara Chamberlain story, which you could watch here. Very similar in a lot of aspects. Kara actually talked to me about her whole story. It was very, very compelling. And Lisa's is equally as harrowing and incredible. So let's get into it. So on November 3rd, 1980, for Lisa McVeigh's life took a harrowing turn. The 17-year-old had just finished her shift at a donut shop and was cycling home in the dark. And unbeknownst to her, serial killer Bobby Joe Long was prowling the streets seeking his next victim. Lisa's background had already been marred by trauma. For 3 years, she had to endure sexual abuse at the hands of her grandmother's boyfriend. This horrific experience had conditioned her to endure violence, a factor that would prove crucial in the events to come. And before the night of the abduction, she actually had planned to end her own life. One bad situation got me to another bad situation. What saved my life caused the night before I'm doing my note, and next night I'm fighting for my life. So as Lisa pedaled through the night, Bobby Joe Long would suddenly emerge from the shadows, and he would forcibly drag her off her bicycle and into his car, pressing the gun against her temple. I just plucked off my bike by God knows who, and I felt the cold steel barrel to the left side of my temple. And in that terrifying moment, Lisa's survival instincts would start to kick in. This determination would become her driving force throughout the whole ordeal. And Long's modus operandi, or Mo, was already well established by this point, so he knew exactly what he was going to do to her. He targeted young women, subjecting them to extreme violence before murdering them. And Lisa would later learn through news reports during her captivity that she was not the first victim, but rather the latest in a string of brutal attacks. And as the car sped through the night, Lisa's mind would start to race. Fear would grip her, and alongside it grew a steely resolve to survive. She began reciting the Lord's Prayer, silently drawing strength from her faith. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, for that is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I just thought I'd do a little subtle brag that my parents made me say that every night before I went to bed, and this is the only time I've ever been able to say it on the internet anyway. Lisa McVeigh would be in the trunk praying and trying to think of what she could do to get out of this time. And she started to actually negotiate with Long, employing psychological tactics to avoid being killed. And she's only 17 at this time. Like, I know we don't know what we would do in these circumstances, but at 17, I was a moron dude. I have no idea what I would do at this point, but I feel like it's almost a womanly instinct to just give an untry to and Kara actually said this in the interview I did with her a piece. The person to maybe get out that way rather than fighting, cause you know you're gonna lose that fight. Lisa's quick thinking and ability to remain calm under extreme duress set her apart from Long's previous victims. She began to formulate a plan, recognizing that her survival depended on her ability to outsmart her captor. Lisa decided to fight not just for her life, but to gather evidence that could potentially lead to Long's capture. So as they approached Long's apartment, Lisa made a crucial decision. She would not merely endure this whole ordeal. She would actively work to ensure her survival and Long's eventual capture. And this resolution marked the beginning of Lisa's transformation from victim to strategist. So they would get inside Long's apartment, and Lisa's true ordeal would begin. For the next 26 hours, she would endure severe torture and multiple rapes, but also engage in a silent battle of wits against her captor. As Long blindfolded Lisa, she remained acutely aware of her surroundings. Despite the terror coursing through her veins, Lisa focused on gathering crucial evidence throughout those 26 hours. She intentionally touched various surfaces in the apartment, leaving behind fingerprints and other traces of evidence that could later aid in the investigation. And Lisa also made mental notes of every sound, smell, and texture she encountered, building a very detailed mental map of her surroundings. And throughout her captivity, Lisa would employ these psychological tactics to kind of humanize herself to Long. Not only did she engage in conversation with him, sharing personal stories and attempting to establish a connection, but she listened to his every word and did whatever he asked her to do. And this approach just aimed to make it more difficult for Long to view her as just a victim and to view her as an actual person. And Lisa also feigned empathy, telling Long she understood why he was committing these crimes, and even offering to be his girlfriend. And she would also count steps from room to room, noted the sounds of nearby traffic, and also attempted to discern any distinctive features of the apartment. And at one point, she even managed to peek under her blindfold, catching a glimpse of Long's car and memorizing the details of its appearance. Like she just like full badass mode, just like fully investigator detective mode. And it's so commendable and amazing. But the psychological tension really peaked when Lisa overheard a news report on television stating that a 17-year-old girl named Lisa McVeigh had been missing. And this moment just kind of crystallized the gravity of her situation, and it also reinforced her determination to survive and bring her captor to justice. So, as the hours passed, Lisa's tactics began to have an effect on Long. Her apparent empathy and willingness to understand him seemed to create a cognitive dissonance in his mind, and Long's behavior towards Lisa began to kind of shift, this point becoming less aggressive and more conflicted. And eventually Long made a decision to release Lisa after she concocted a story also about how she had a sick family member and she was the only one that could take care of him. He really started to sympathize and empathize with her, so he decided to actually let her go. So he would doctor her to a location near her home, and he would keep her blindfolded before letting her go. Long told Lisa not to contact the police and also to wait 5 minutes before taking off her blindfold after he left. And this was a command that she had no intention of following. So as Lisa heard Long start to drive away, she knew her ordeal was far from over. But she would go home, and upon her arrival, she would actually be beaten by her guardian's boyfriend and interrogated for 5 hours because her family didn't believe that this actually happened. I mean, she came from a family that had no empathy towards her and in fact saw her on multiple occasions. So she literally had to prove that she had been kidnapped and had escaped also. But her accounts would remain consistent, and they would finally call the police and she would be questioned. But luckily, as I mentioned before, Lisa had committed to memory several details about her abduction and intentionally left fingerprints on several surfaces and in Long's apartment. And she did that just in case she actually died there, they would have evidence that she was in the apartment. She didn't even know she would escape at this point, but she thought ahead that much. And through her description of her captor, his vehicle and the route they took and other details, police were actually able to track down Long and connect him to hers and other crimes. So officers began a surveillance operation and arrested Long on November 16, 1980 for essay and kidnapping of Lisa McVeigh. And while Long was arrested and put on trial, he showed no sense of care or empathy for what he did to Lisa or the other victims, nearly bragging about all the deaths that he had caused. A lot of lives just gone right down the tubes because of me. And he was also seen in court spitting on the camera, showing his lack of care and just clear anger towards being caught. And on September 23, 1985, Long would plead guilty to his crimes against Lisa McVeigh and an additional 8 counts of first-degree murder and 8 counts of kidnapping and 7 counts of sexual battery. And he received a life sentence on every count in Hillsborough County, and additionally, he received death sentences for the murders of Michelle and E. Sims and Virginia Johnson. And following Long's conviction, McVeigh channeled her trauma into a career dedicated to protecting others. She joined the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, rising through the ranks to become a master deputy. And in this role, McVeigh has worked tirelessly to advocate for victims of human trafficking. And her unique perspective as both a survivor and law enforcement officer has just made her an invaluable asset in victim support and crime prevention initiatives. A documentary was even released called Believe Me, The Abduction of Lisa McVeigh, which I highly recommend watching, and it just recounts her whole experience of everything that had happened. And at the end of it all, she actually forgave Herc after stating that what he did changed who she was in the horror. She endured but forgives him spite. Bobby Joe Long, people ask me what I would say to you if you were standing in front of me, and here's my answer, Bobby Joe Long. Thank you for choosing me instead of another 17-year-old little girl. The reason why I say thank you now is because I have forgiven you for what you have done to me. Had I not forgiven you, I might as well be in my own prison without walls. God has shown me the only way to really be free when someone bestows injustice against you is complete forgiveness. My life changed forever and for the better. I chose not to remain a victim. I chose to live. So not only did she escape her captor, but she helped bring him to justice like a badass bitch. And she also got to see his execution, which, as you know, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but this guy's like next level piece shit. And for her to watch him fearful of death is the cherry on the cake for me. He was a monster, he is still a monster until the day he takes his last breath. You've said in the past that you'd like to witness his execution. Do you still want to do that? I will be there on May 23rd at 6 p.m. I will be witnessing his execution. It's something I need to do for myself. But it is a shocking tale of not just revenge, but overcoming all to still forgive the horrors he had did to hers. And I think she is just so amazing and like, absolutely, I'm just gonna keep doing this. But that brings us to our next story, which is about KallMeKris McElroy. But this story is a little different. Instead of the main character being the hero, he was known as the town bully. And this one just has community service written all over it. A community really coming together. I think you're gonna like this one a lot. But KallMeKris McElroy, or McElroy, whatever you want to pronounce, was born June 1st, 1934 to a family of over 16 children. Why were they doing that back then? I guess they had time and farms and they needed help. I guess I don't know. Seems like a lot. One seems like a lot to me anyway. But they were a migrant family that tenant farmed, which meant they lived on land that was owned by a landlord, therefore contributed to work to live there, basically. Hence the 16 children, lot of help. But from what I gather, it's pretty much an indentured servitude, but anyway. He was known as being a very rambunctious child. He didn't care about school at all. He dropped out at the age of 15 and was known to cattle rustle, which is pretty much just stealing cows and livestock. However, he was known for much worse, such as being a womanizer and a small-time thief, you know, as you do at the age of 15. But this reputation would carry on where he would for the next decade be known as a thief. And he would stand at 6 foot to weigh about 270 pounds and intimidating the townsfolk of Skidmore, Missouri. It's a big guy, that's a big scary guy. And he was so intimidating that no one actually wanted to press charges against him despite him stealing gasoline, alcohol, antiques, livestock, and plenty of other crimes. And apparently with the 21 charges, no one testified when he was brought into the legal system because they were scared that he would eventually come for them after he got out. And this womanizer would continue his antics and would apparently father over 10 children in his lifetime, all with different women. Quite literally the definition of a womanizer. But I doubt fathered is a good term. I'm going to safely assume that he wasn't much of a father figure at all. But his last wife was named Trina McLeod, who was 12 years old and in the 8th grade when he was 35. 12 and 35, just let that marinate. That's a crime. This wasn't the only disgusting thing about the relationship though, as he would repeatedly rape and abuse her, which is just fucking terrible. Like, I don't even know how. I mean, I know age gaps, but 35 and 12, oh, that's a baby. That is literally a baby. Like, he's a fucking monster. And the parents obviously didn't agree with their relationship. However, they were immediately swindled by the fact that he was threatening them, as well cause he's a fucking bully. And by threats, I mean going through with the threats saying he burned their house down, and he just did that. And to add insult to injury, he also shot their dog. And I mean, this guy was genuinely a spawn of Satan burning, stealing, and of course the saw and drape. I mean, he is the devil personified, a modern-day barbarian, if you will. So he was just a pillaging, stalking pedo abuser and more. And the descriptions of him would continue to add up. And eventually his 14-year-old wife, Trina McLeod, would become pregnant, which involved her having to drop out of the 9th grade, obviously. And she would then move in with McElroy and his second wife, Cars. He just, decided to have multiple wives, not just Cars. And his second wife would be Allison. There was another woman already there named Marcia, but she was kicked out to make room for Trina. And he had divorced his second wife, Alice, to avoid the statutory rape charges, since she was the only witness. Just giant piece of shit. And Alice was obviously not happy about this and supposedly had run away along with Trina and her new child from McElroy and went to Trina's parents' home to escape him. However, McElroy would hunt her down and bring Alice back. And a few days later, when Trina's parents were gone, he would burn down their house and shoot their new dog. As I had mentioned, that is why he did that. And Trina would later get her freedom when she would take her son to get a checkup at the doctor. She told the doctors what had happened, and the doctor would notify the authorities, and social welfare wouldn't. The baby was not only put into foster care, but Trina was tranquilized and hospitalized primarily to protect her from McElroy. And after being interviewed by the authorities in June 1973, McElroy was booked arrested, and then released on a $25 bail. However, McElroy would finally push the justice system too far in 1980. One of the McElroy children stopped by to buy some candy, and due to the mild confusion at the register, the child walked out of the grocery store without paying. And when the clerk ran after them, and the oldest of the children grabbed the candy and put it back in the store, angry and yelling at how they could accuse her of stealing. And the owners of the shop, Bo and Lois Bowenkamp, tried to solve the issue just through discussion. And the children, still upset, continued to argue that Lois would ban them from the store forever. And McElroy would later learn about this, and only a few minutes later arrive at the store threatening Lois Bowenkamp with a pocket knife, and he would whip her hurt. Yes. So the Bowenkamps, being the fucking afraid of this monster coming into their store and threatening them, would just try to explain everything, and he would just try to explain everything, and he would eventually calm down and just ask for a pack of camels. However, despite the issue seemingly being solved, they denied his business and told him to leave. McElroy then sat in his truck and watched the store until they left. And when they returned home,